Hello there. I'm your moderator, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by the distinguished Samit Halvadia. How are you doing today?
I am well, Sage. Every week, I'm excited to hear what adjective you'll use to describe me. And
Yep,
distinguished, you can tell by the gray in my beard that
exactly.
distinguished is a proper adjective. But excited about today's session. So thanks for having me on.
It's going to be a fun one. And we're also joined by Ruben Spruijt of Nutanix. And Ruben is a longtime member of the tech space and has a great experience that we'll be getting into this episode of the podcast. And we're really excited to have you on the podcast. How are you doing, Ruben?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think, Sage, before we get into it, we had a little anecdote earlier, and I do believe that Ruben should share it. As an EUC legend, or as an EUC Avenger, as you put it,
Yes.
Sage, we do deserve giving the listeners and the community in general Ruben pronouncing his own last name,
Yes.
right? I mean, he's been over the last 20 years called a variety of different last names, but he's always Ruben. So, Ruben, do you want to take this opportunity to tell all of our listeners exactly how to pronounce your name?
There's a couple of things. So the bad way is like Spruijt, something like that. That's not that's not good.
You don't like that?
No, that's not. No, I'm fine. All fine. Like the easy way, Coca-Cola, Fanta, Sprite. Sprite is close to Spruit with a rolling R. So Spruijt, Ruben Spruijt, that's who I am.
There you go.
That's Sprite. Sprite is fine as well. All good.
Okay.
See, this Arkansas boy cannot roll his R's very well.
See? Give it a try then.
What is it? Spruijt?
Spruijt, Ruben Spruijt.
Ruben Spruijt. Spruijt?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Ruben Spruijt drinkt een Grolsbeugel. No.
Drinks some Carlsberg. That's great.
I'm really looking forward to it.
The Dutch folks probably will laugh about Grolsbeugel. They know what it is. So. Grols is like a Grolsch, is like a Dutch beer.
Yeah.
And Beugel is like a clip, like a beer bottle with a clip. So Grolsbeugel. Okay. Ruben Spruijt drinkt een Grolsbeugel. It's me drinking a beer with a special
with a cap.
Exactly.
Like the Grolsches. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I've seen the Grolsch. That's the horrific American way of saying Grolsch, right?
So yeah, learning every day, huh?
This is great. I always enjoy hearing people pronounce their name in the actual pronunciation, and then trying and failing most miserably at that pronunciation.
I remember the days in Briforum, so that's a long time ago, like 10 years ago. I had I think an hour and a half like session, blah SmackDown session. It was like an hour and a half.
Oh yeah.
And because it was like an hour, because it was an hour and a half, I thought, hey, why not sort of in between, like 45 minutes, do a sort of contest? And I know this was like in Amsterdam in Nemo, like a sort of science museum.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did a contest, like who can pronounce my last name the best. And I really bought like presents, like this Rolls Beugel.
Yeah.
And Ari, that's what I remember. It just popped up by this conversation. But that's how you can make fun of my last name.
Were Dutch people eligible?
No, exactly.
Okay.
No,
it had to be non-Dutch, non-native Dutch.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was fun. It was fun because we made fun of each other as well, like we do right now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think bringing up that right there, you have, I think, maybe the most prolific library of content on the internet around some of the content that you produce. I've seen podcast episodes, multiple podcast episodes with you, webinars, blog posts. And then funny that you should mention this, Samit, about the Avengers. Ruben does have Avengers in his Twitter bio.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like he's one of the Avengers, man. We're slowly starting to build
think
out.
big, huh? Think big.
Yeah.
There's always something on the horizon you want to achieve.
But for people that may not have seen kind of your back catalog of content, could you give an overview of your of who you are and your history in the space?
Right now, let's go from where I am right now and then back.
Okay.
I'm right now technologist at Nutanix and mainly focused on the frame side. Frame is DaaS, like desktop as a service. Nutanix acquired sort of our company a little bit more than 4 years ago. I was part of Frame. Before Frame, I was part of Atlantis, and storage startup in California. And prior to Atlantis, and this is probably, I would say, 2015, so like 7 years ago, I spent 12.5 years at PQR, a large system integrator, managed service provider. And prior to that, spent 5 years in an called a startup. My dad, together with 2 other colleagues, did start an like IT shop back in the days of Novell and Windows 3 and DOS and OS2, like long time ago. And prior to that, I did finish my school, university. So yeah, that's me. But always like tech, feet on the ground. I love technology. Still today, like huge lab. Wear different hats, many hats, from executive to geek to author to solution architect to writer to industry analyst, presenter. Yeah, different hats. That's what I like.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Ruben, because that's one of the unique things about our industry in EUC, right? Like to your point, you know, there's so many different paths on this journey to get to where you are today, right?
Oh, yeah.
I've always been on the vendor path. We've had Yanni and a couple of other folks on that have been on the IT services side. Like when you hear Jeff Ulatowski talk about app volumes and the problems it solves, he talks about it like someone who is deploying app volumes in their 10,000 seat enterprise environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start thinking about like the fact that people have vendor-based biases, people that have done the PQR, like yours is very unique in the sense that you started specifically around desktop engineering and endpoint management, you know, the traditional way with Novell and the brain share shows and NetWare and you know, so like when you start thinking about the fact that at PQR you started expanding into VDI beyond just endpoint management to the point that you've now specialized specifically in DAS, you know, from your perspective, which of the pieces of this journey do you think have kind of led you to DAS? Is DAS the most exciting part of where we're going next, in your opinion?
Yes, that's what I think, and why? Because DAS is also, I would say, between air quotes, and if you just listening in and not watching the air quotes here, DAS is, I would say, it's still a huge market, like a 4 billion market in the next couple of years, so a huge market, but still an element in the toolbox of end user computing, and that's I'm always sort of really triggered into, hey, how can we help you, me, us, we, sort of business consumers in getting work done, getting enjoyable work done, work from everywhere. And DAS, like 10 years ago, DAS didn't exist as we know today, but the technology in the toolbox did exist. And that's what I really like what can technology do to make life just better, easier? And that is like possible on many different fronts. And that's what I like. Always stay close to, quote, me, and not Ruben, but like us as consumers of services, of technology to get work done. And that is a fundamental element of that, because Windows apps are a fundamental element in a modern workspace now in 2022, but also like next 5, 10, 15 years. And besides software as a service, besides mobile apps, besides new apps we don't know yet, or new platforms we don't know yet. So that's what I find and like really about this industry. It's never, like there's never a dull moment. There's always something sort of new, or something is changing in that space. And that's what I really like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And kind of what's interesting about that, right, is, as you've said it, you know, DAS is now the next part of EUC. It's just a bolt on to what was there before, which was VDI and desktop virtualization. And prior to that, it was RDS and terminal services. And prior to that, it was, you know, a mainframe. So, you know, you're starting to see a lot of that evolution, and those tools and technologies just kind of start to evolve. Now, for me, like, you know, being on the Windows app side, one of the things that I've seen most interesting is something that, like, it's the journey you've taken, which is going from EUC VDI, virtualization SME. I understand how to do user segmentation. I understand how to do app segmentation. I know how to do my sizing for my Citrix farm. I know which ones are going to be persistent. I know which ones are going to be pooled and hosted, concurrent. All of that stuff is still very relevant when you start thinking about DAS, but for some reason, for some reason, that level of subject matter expertise doesn't seem to be hindering deployments. Like we saw VDI only achieve, if you believe the industry analyst, maybe a 10% market penetration from 2008 to basically 2022 with a 7 to 9% year over year growth, a modest growth, but a growth. And all of a sudden you see DAS, these problems still exist in my mind, app segmentation and user segmentation, but now desktop engineering and virtualization SMEs are starting to work together, and you're starting to see adoption at a rate that VDI just never had. I mean, do you kind of see that type of trend? What do you think is driving the DAS adoption so much faster than VDI?
Yeah, I would say on one side, like many of the challenges, the challenges you described, when you look at apps and user persona and like user environment and user environment management, like all these items are still, I would say, relevant and the same in some degree.
Yeah.
But what is different, and that's also driving like the call it DAS, like desktop as a service, is that like certain elements are much more simpler than it is like traditionally. And why? Because we are in a transitioning phase from software to service. I would say no one, of course, there are still scenarios, but air quote, no one is installing Exchange. Everyone is using like workspaces as a service, like Office 365 as a service, or Google Workspace or Zoho, or these type of like services solutions. Sure. And that's happening in the, call it like virtual app and desktop delivery space as well, in the VDI space, in the application remoting space, in the desktop as a service space. That sort of transition from software to service is happening big time. Yeah. And the beauty of cloud services, both on the infrastructure side and on the platform side, on the desktop as a service side, is that you don't need to be if the product is designed well, you don't need to be an expert just to get started with it. You still need to be in some degree an expert on the Windows side to sort of make Windows run best. Yeah. But to run the platform, you don't need to be a ninja to to make that happen. And that's really helpful. So more and more people can leverage a platform like that. It's easy to get started. It's super scalable when you look at public cloud, but it also has its challenges if you look at public cloud. And that's another angle. Maybe we touch base on that topic later, where I believe that in a DAS context, many people think DAS equals public cloud or public cloud service.
Yeah, definitely.
And in my opinion, that's half the story. It could be, depending which sort of solution or vendor you're looking at. But the reality for many of us is that hybrid and cloud smart makes much more sense than like cloud first and cloud only, or mono cloud, or whatever you want to call it. And that's, I would say, driving the adoption is much simpler. There's clear demand, work from home, work from everywhere. Windows apps are relevant to get work done. And all these ingredients combined makes DAS like end user computing on Red Bull, something like that.
If I break that, because you gave a lot of information there, if I delve into two pieces that I think, we can take away from this. Number one, Windows apps are going to be there forever, or for our lifetime, as a hindrance or whatever you want to call it. It's either going to aid your productivity
as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's so you're going to end up with the Windows apps. But you said something interesting. Part of the reason that DAS is being adopted more widely is because you don't need that subject matter expertise to stand up the infrastructure, because it's as a service, you just kind of turn it on. But you also said there still needs to be a component of Windows expertise there, right? Yes. So someone still needs to understand endpoint management, image management, operational IT around change management. What are some of the pieces that, if just because I can turn on a cloud and turn on a desktop up there, what are the things that you typically guide your customers and your partners towards focusing on to make that cloud and service that they turn on relevant and useful?
Yeah, let me think about that for like a second. I think it always starts first with like the why question. Why do you want to do certain things? And that sounds a little bit fluffy, but if you really understand the why, from a business and customer perspective, that is super important. The mistake we as technologists often make is, okay, dive deep into like the technology itself, and
Mhm.
we can build an awesome technical solution for sure. But if it doesn't fit what the end user and the business wants, time lost, money lost. So the why is first, and in that why conversation is also about me understanding the persona, and also the applications attached to my persona are super important. And that's where like the Windows conversation kicks in.
Yeah.
And that's where like DAS and Windows kicks in. And then you have the tools in a toolbox to make classic Windows apps work in a modern environment. And there are newer apps, there are new sort of like platforms to analyze apps and you know, all of that as well. And these are important in today's world. And there are also like newer technologies to make app delivery in a classic Windows environment much easier. And that could be baked into the DAS platform.
Right.
It could be like Microsoft with certain innovations and developments, or a combination of both. And that's what that's where the sort of expertise kicks in. There's some sort of consulting expertise with like sort of the ability to talk business language, understand the why, understand the, and that's what I like. That type of combination is important if you want to make progress, and not only the technology part of it.
So, you know, it's interesting that the why question, and I was just about to dig into the business side of it when you brought it up, right? One of the things that expectations that a lot of enterprises have of their IT departments now is a lot more strategic than just operational, right? So we're dealing with a manufacturing company that is looking to save money by moving to cloud. And, you know, if that's the why, is that really the right reason? Is it about accessibility? Is it about user experience? Is it about cost savings? Is it about a more secure environment? And everyone ticks off these boxes and ultimately says yes. But what have you found? Because one of the questions that comes back to me is not just, okay, what should the sizes, what types of VMs, what types of applications, all that technology wise we can solve, right? That's not a problem. It's getting people to understand the business side of why. Am I reducing risks? How do I quantify that? Can I put this in
the
my
whole war
OpEx
for
budget?
talent and making sure that people, like retaining people, like finding people and retaining them and keeping them happy is super important and challenging for many companies. And technology plays an important part of it. Like imagine you join a new company, and from a technology perspective, everything is so 1990s, and there's nothing wrong with the 1990s, by the way. I like the music and the movies, and so on. But imagine that's sort of the starting point. Probably that if that happens, I will be gone in 2 days or 2 weeks or maybe 2 months. So
especially if you're waiting for your laptop that long, right? Like someone's imaging it. Someone's imaging it, installing it, and then shipping it to you.
If it doesn't meet the sort of called expectations, the business consumer. That's why I use the term business consumer. We have a consumer mindset, and we use that mindset to go to our office, remote office, physical office, or hybrid. And that is the mindset we have, and especially with younger kids. I have 3 kids, 22, 19, 16. I call them kids, but they actually are adults or young adults. But their mindset is different than my mindset when I entered sort of the business, and different than my dad's mindset when he started his own business. So that if you still are stuck in the old mindset, good luck with talent, I would say. And that's I would say also a huge element in the whole end user computing conversation, because end user computing is close to you, to me, to we, to us. And if that is connected well and matches with the expectations and is awesome, then that helps with talent in a broad sense.
I think talent's an interesting one too, and just the evolution, right? The evolution of processes and the evolution of technology seem to go hand in hand philosophically, right? Like I'll tell you this quick off tangent story, but my first job, I was inside BDR for Install Shield. So BDR, business development rep, calling 100 leads and following up and doing all that good stuff. And I became a sales engineer, an inside sales engineer. And I had this rep who was at the time maybe 45 years old, young guy, but he was like chronologically, like his spirit was like 75 years old. So he used to sell at CA and Platinum, if you remember those names, Ruben. He was a sales rep there, and he'd be on the road, and he's like, I don't have to worry about email. I would go back into the office. My secretary or admin would hand me a sheet of pink notes with messages around people I needed to call back and stuff like that. So the first time Install Shield gave us smartphones, they weren't even Bez, they weren't BlackBerry, they were Trios. He immediately put his in his drawer and didn't take it out for like the next year and a half. And he's like, I'll get my email when I plug my laptop in, right? I'm like, no, you'll get your email now as I send it to you because I need a response. So just like, you look at technology and the way that's evolving. You use the term business consumer, right? We joke about this. I just like to go to a store, install my app, and then have it work, whether it's on my phone or even the Microsoft store, right? The Mac OS store. Is EUC technology in your mind? I mean, put Liquid out there, put, Windows Package Manager and Winget and Chocolatey. Do you think that within our next 5 years around Windows apps and the criticality that they provide to the business, that the concept of a storefront and delivery mechanism is going to be a material part of endpoint management?
A good question. Let me think about that. So is like the storefront in like integrated material part of like endpoint management?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No?
I think they are like two, in my opinion, two sort of different islands with different audiences as well, which sort of come together in like the workspace itself.
They do, yes.
Like, hey, with smart icons and being smart of it. But I don't see sort of one vendor doing that. There are multiple awesome vendors in our space, and they work well. They add great value to it. But to be sort of really fully integrated and like everywhere, these type of companies need to be like much bigger to make like the difference. And that's what I don't see happening in the next 5 years or so.
What is the timeline, do you think?
I don't know if it will happen. What I see happening, I see like if you look at the EUC space, if you look at Citrix and VMware, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't need a crystal ball. Not into that particular sort of area, but I see huge challenges and opportunities for others as well in that space. Huge challenges because I expect, that's what I hear left and right, talking to different people, that their focus will be like the top 100, top 1,000 sort of customers.
Right.
What means, okay, what's the huge mid-market will do? And
I was just in a meeting yesterday. We had a meeting yesterday, and that's what the conversation was about was, hey, these big companies, we saw Citrix, we saw VMware, they're saying, hey, we want our top 100 clients. Those are our focus.
Exactly.
Where
good luck
if
you're customer 101 or customer 1,001 or whatever it is. So that's one element in like the answer I gave to. That's why I don't believe they're sort of an integrated and everywhere sort of store with management as well. But that also means there's a huge market and also a huge opportunity for others in that space. If it's Liquid or Workspace 365 or Rimo3, like different solutions with different companies with different solutions, right? Or Frame, like that doesn't matter. Like there's a huge market for that when the change of wind is happening, and that's happening right now. I think it's beneficial for Microsoft in that particular EUC space, and also very beneficial for like Nutanix Frame, for Frame type customers as well, or potential customers. So. And that's I think the reality in the next like 5 years, huge changes in the landscape, but also reality if you're like big into Citrix, it's not that you just sort of migrate from A to B like in a week or 2 weeks. It's it's integrated deeply into the organization. That took years, often years to make it happen. So it will not happen in days or weeks to sort of unwind that. It will also take time. Even in like a fast market like cloud and DaaS, there's still time involved and effort involved to make it happen. The beauty of like a DaaS service is that you can often run it sort of side by side, and that also helps in migration. And especially if you use the tools like in your organization, or you look at Liquid or other solutions, and you can use the tools on both sides. For instance, on the VMware on frame side, or the Citrix on a VMware side, doesn't matter for the conversation.
Yeah.
Then you can use the same tools to make the migration also like much smoother on that side.
Mm-hmm.
That's also an important one.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing around the concept of the enterprise store was not so much around a single vendor to rule them all, Ruben. I think the interesting thing that I've heard from customers is, as they've started their co-management journey that you've just talked about, the side-by-side DAS and on-prem and hybrid, and this industry buzzword of co-management, which started with, I'm doing some on-prem config manager, I'm doing some in the cloud MDM with Intune, right? Like that's what it was, right? But this concept of the enterprise store that I'm talking about is very much around allowing these larger enterprises out there that have started their journey from config manager to Intune, let's say. But Intune doesn't bring all of the flexibility and all of the deployment methodologies, support all the file formats, support all of the permutations of workspaces that they're going to deliver to. Is there a better way? Like, I mean, talking to our good friend Jim Moyle, a lot of times, he's got this beautiful vision around Windows Package Manager being a part of that overall solution. But for the first time, and I just wanted to get your thoughts, for the first time ever, talking to like the FSI, the financial services and insurance that are part of the Intune TAP program and Endpoint Manager, they're actually looking at leveraging Windows Package Manager as part of their endpoint strategy, because they can put their own customized version of the apps up there. But again, they have the subject matter expertise to manage and operationalize and deliver that. Not everyone has that.
And if you don't have that expertise, then you need to be smart with it and sort of outsource that, or find brilliant solutions to make that happen. And that's I think that's where like the ecosystem, that's why the ecosystem around. That's why our ecosystem, I would say, is so important, and that's what I like about end user computing as well. I also see what you mentioned that triggered me to. I do see like the sort of what I mentioned earlier, from software to service. I see that from different angles, from like classic AD to modern IDP, from classic AD to Azure AD, or from classic AD to, for instance, Okta or Google Identity. Like that's what I see as well, and hybrid modes in between, especially on the Microsoft side. I see similar like transition from classic endpoint management, like classic Windows endpoint management, to unified endpoint management with mobile, with Mac, with Windows, with company owned, with like personally owned or hybrid. You mentioned Intune on the VMware side as well. Like I think that's sort of a two horse race between these two. We'll see how long that will last or not. We'll see. But that's what I also see. And what I mentioned earlier, from VDI to DAS, that's where I also see. And then DAS, like look at AVD. Flexible, complex in some degree as well, and on the like cloud PC with Windows 365, super simple. Has its use cases for sure, but there's some in some sense might be too simple. But that direction of like modern IDP, Intune, there's a modern management, a cloud service, simple, focus on simple. That direction is what I see sort of on many sides happening.
It almost seems a lot like a democratization of it. Like there's a lot of people originally that had this kind of creation of, we're going to make this as technical as possible and see if we can make it work. And now it's
make good money with that.
Exactly. Let's make sure we have our jobs for the next 20 years. And now we have a lot of people like, I don't really want to do that. Let's see if we can make it more simple. On that topic of things, like where are you seeing some of like the gaps in this market? As you're saying, we've got these big companies that are, this is only what we're doing now. You guys have the rest. Where are some of the gaps that you're seeing?
Yeah, the gaps is that what you described is what I see as well. Like it is great for consulting and for like just making hours if the solution is complex, or if the user interface is shitty, or if it's not just easy to use. If the solution is not simple from a UI perspective, or not simple from an API, from a developer perspective, then that's a bad starting point. And I see like DaaS products in that space, which gives a huge opportunity for consulting and MSPs to fill in that gap. But I would say fundamentally, I believe it's much better if the solution from the start is built with like simple in mind. And simple is a superpower in my opinion. So where are the gaps? Well, there are many sort of vendors born in the space where this didn't apply. That's a huge curse and blessing. If you have a huge backpack with functions and features, it's great. It's a huge backpack. You can almost fill in everything, but that's also a curse. If you're just looking for a simple solution, which just works, then yeah, good luck with that. And that's what I see happening. So where are the gaps? That's what I see. A gap in knowledge. People think a on-prem copy paste to cloud. And then I ask questions about like cloud specifics. No clue. That's like an alarm bell, like volume 100 for me. We want to go to cloud, and I ask like question A, B, and C. No, we don't know. Okay, maybe it's So that's what important as well to be ready for such an like next step. That's a gap in licensing. That's not a sexy, maybe sexy not the right term, but not like an energizing topic. But it's in reality as well, like in licensing, in the classic world, it's challenging to run Windows 10 or Windows 11 in what's called listed provider, like AWS and Google, or Ali Cloud or Oracle Cloud. It's challenging, and the same applies for Office. And yeah, I don't sort of control that, of course, but I think it's much better for the industry, for customers, for partners, that it's sort of an equal playing field where customers and partners can use Office and Windows, single user and multi-user on all platforms where it makes sense. I think it's much more beneficial for all of us if that's the case. And
almost all of us. Almost.
Yeah,
not for Microsoft.
For sure, there are reasons why this is happening, technical or non-technical. But yeah, that's also, in my opinion, a gap. And like a gap in, I would say, in general, competition is healthy. And that's in general. And if you look specifically on the GPU side, with Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, where NVIDIA is leading the pack, especially in the data center and cloud space, when you look at end user computing. And it's a great product and great solutions for sure. But it's good to have more competition on that side as well. Competition is healthy, drives innovation, also drives costs down in some degree. And that's also helpful in the like EUC context. Yeah. So multiple gaps on different levels.
Yeah, as far as gaps go, it's interesting. And I think that, Ruben, all of the ones that you brought up are absolutely legit. And if, I'm not as clever as you, so I can take it a step back. And if I think about this, the way I think about this is there's a gap between straddling and bridging legacy operations, the way that we've always done things, to the way we need to do things, right? And this is one of the pieces that people are most scared about, because I've done user segmentation this way my whole life. I've done discovery of my applications by looking and crawling my GPO and my Active Directory to see which apps have been installed. I mean, it's like basically saying, here's a Tesla, right? But you've always driven a horse and a buggy. So why don't you whip this Tesla? And that's the process to obviously make it go, right? If you don't update the processes and the tooling, you might as well just kind of stay in the 1990s and watch Pretty Woman, which I know you're going to do tonight, Ruben. So that's okay. There's no judgment here. But if you start thinking about not updating the processes and the toolings to drive automation, so like discovery, back in 2008, when we were trying to do user segmentation, there was great tooling, Liquidware, Lakeside. They did a bunch of the stuff around persistent, non-persistent. We're still doing it the same way in 2022. And that's wrong, right? Like, you're looking at things that are born from the cloud. You're not always carrying legacy debt. When you have legacy technical debt that you have to carry over, there has to be something that you take from the legacy operational days, but you have to bridge it with something modern. And if you're not using new processes, new innovations, and this is one of the things that I hold the GSIs, kind of accountable for, where I've always done it this way. It's, well trodden. I know predictable revenue models. I know predictable hours, predictable SOWs.
Yep.
You kind of have to move away from that and start looking at innovation, because the technology landscape and the partner landscape is constantly innovating with tools filling in the gaps like you're talking about, but the processes are not. So from my perspective, until we fix that process problem and the education problem, we could have all the great tooling in the world, but we're still going to be whipping a Tesla with a leather whip.
And also, and I totally agree. Like, it's another element to add to that is also, it's like here between the ears,
right?
Like if it's just, if that's still like what you do today, like if the answer is like, hey, I've done it like the past 20 years, that's why I need to do it for the next like 5 years or 10 years. Yeah, that could be the answer. But start again with why. It could be part of the answer, but start with why. Okay, why are we doing for the next 5 years? Why are we using the tools we used like for the last 15 years? Why not start from scratch? And instead of a backpack full of features and technology, maybe start from scratch. Do I need all these bells and whistles? Do I need all this technology?
Yeah.
And maybe the answer is yes. Great, continue. Yeah. But likely, especially these days, the answer is well, maybe not so much. That's
it's not an all or nothing, Ruben, right? Like some of it will still be, I have to use legacy for wealth management because they are persistent, high performing assets. And then I can use something else for a different part. So, the all or nothing mindset that we've historically had around VDI, we'd like to think that we did a great job with user segmentation, app segmentation, and desktop side. We really didn't, right? Like, otherwise it would be adopted at a much larger scale than it is today.
And sometimes it's also scary to step out of the comfort zone, and that's applicable to technology, EUC, and like on a personal level, business, and like on many sides. But I would say like often that's where the magic happens, and that's scary. And that applies to like running or boxing or like obstacle running, like or motorbiking or whatever it is, like nothing EUC technology related, but it's also like rewarding and provides new energy and new insights and new connections and new networks and new like fun.
Well, it gets the idea of like asking yourself why you're doing these things instead of being like you said, there's customers that, we're moving to the cloud. Why are you moving to the cloud?
Yeah. Sometimes I say, what was the last time you did something for the first time? So what was the last time you did something for the first time? And if that is like 20 years ago was the last time I did something new. And that applies not only to like this technology EUC side of things, but also just on the personal side. And that connects to mental health, like how it does. How people operate, how I operate, and also from a mental health perspective. It's good to step out of the comfort zone and do new things. And that can be huge. It can be a huge thing for me. Well, someone else might say, well, that's a minor thing. Doesn't matter if it's small or big. If it's something new for yourself and it's rewarding and scary in some degree, go for it. And that also applies to technology, maybe new tools or a new approach.
Well, you think, you think about that, right? And you have to balance it a little bit. And I agree with you because I try to do one new thing every week, right? Something that I've never done because it's a thing me and my kids do. So like for them, it's way easier, right? They're 9 and 7. They haven't done much. But, if you start thinking about this concept, you don't want to diminish your own human value, meaning that as a subject matter expert that we've made a lot of money making things technically complex, we don't necessarily want to introduce the concept of innovation and replacing some of our subject matter expertise that makes us special, right? Whereas the reality of it is this mindset kind of has to shift to say, actually, I can, to your point, do something new in EUC with technology that I've never done before. So I'm going to take all this change management legacy stuff. I'm going to automate as much of the boring stuff as I can with tooling that's out there, and then focus on innovating over here around a new revenue generating initiative, right?
Big time. And it also helps big time on the conversation with talent, because if it's tough to find people, or tough to retain people, okay, get rid of all the boring stuff so that people don't need to think about that. And that also helps in an enjoyable job. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
If you're doing 80% innovation as opposed to 80% mundane, I know
Yeah.
that my job satisfaction for my personality profile would be much more fulfilled.
Was it the other day that you shared something on Twitter, Ruben, about retention in the current remote workforce? Like we had these different eras of jobs. You had people that they needed to have a job so they could survive. Then it shifted to, oh, I need to have a job so I can have this cost of living that I now have. And now it's more of like, well, I now just want quality of life in my job.
Meaningful job in some degree as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I meant earlier, like with the sort of talent. Yeah, that makes awesome. What does your workforce look like? And where do you want to go? Also from a like colleagues perspective and an employee perspective, it's an important important topic. Yeah, big time.
Job satisfaction. Now that we've shifted the mindset from you have to work and otherwise you seem lazy and unmotivated to I'm spending a third of my life here, right? if not more than that. I need to make sure that I'm getting something out of it more than a paycheck.
We're spending our Friday, like for me,
Exactly.
Friday evening to have this conversation. So it is fun. Right. Otherwise, why shouldn't we do it?
So I do have an off the wall kind of question for you because I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson podcast recently while I've been walking.
So question not prepped, right? We'll see.
Yeah, not prepped, right? And it's just it's an out. You can't get it wrong. So that's always a bonus,
that's a relief.
Right? So he brings up this concept of humanity's challenges with understanding statistical probability, like the concept of exponential growth, right? He's like, people just don't get that, right? And he says, think about the way that technology is adopted historically. And he gives this a really kind of compelling example for me, which was, people figured out how to record live action at some point. Right. So they had a video camera and they figured out how to capture what was happening in front of them. And for the longest time, they just used that technology to capture stage plays. And then they would rewatch the stage plays. And then they realized they could create their own content with this. Right. So the first 20 years of video cameras was just recording plays. And then suddenly people started recording movies. Then they started distributing movies to theaters. Then they started creating more types of contents that could be distributed to people's homes. And then like this last 20 years has been such an explosion of, now you have YouTube, you have member driven content being created and consumed. You just start
and even like too many memberships, like 10 memberships to watch
10 memberships. Yeah. But like you have everything at the tips of your fingers. When the first person 80 years ago that recorded this, for the first 20 years, they just watched plays, then suddenly movies, then distribution, then you create your own content. You consume content anywhere. You consume content on a plane. This happened in this last tail end of the video recorder's life, right? Like the exponential growth of use cases. Coming back to that concept, we're probably on the, I don't care if you want to call MetaFrame or if you want to call RDS, any of that terminal services, VDI. But let's say for all intents and purposes, since 1989 was modern-ish VDI. 2008 is real desktop virtualization, in my opinion. In the last kind of 20 years, we've started seeing the old endpoint management turn into VDI, turn into DAS, turn into hybrid work, turn into enterprise stores. The next 10 years, what does that EUC landscape look like? What's the thing that exponential just kind of, pow, this is going to happen?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So next 10 years,
and you can't get it wrong. Yeah, you can't get
exactly.
it right. Just know,
because we don't know. Like 3 months ago, we didn't know what happened with Twitter. As an example. So
although some of the tweets are really funny though. Like it's been really enjoyable to follow that.
Yeah. So what will happen? I've like just like moving faster from software to service is what I see. That's happening. Like new type of ways to collaborate. I spent time with like Meta and also Glue. If you look at glue.work. Just a different way, like we use like unified communications right now, and unified comms and like physical comms being like sitting next to each other and having a drink together. This is common, but I expect like other type of collaboration, like I explained with glue.
Yeah.
It sometimes feels like a sort of game, and if you have never experienced it yourself, you might say, I will play games myself, but this is not a game. This is just a different way to collaborate, where like physical and virtual sort of blend together. I truly believe for certain use cases, besides physical, besides virtual, like we do right now, this other way of collaboration makes a lot of sense. I spend time in these type of platforms myself, and was really flabbergasted by how it works, and also sort of how energizing it is to collaborate differently like that. The sort of transition from like all the items I mentioned earlier, from like all like modern IDP, modern management, modern applications, services, cloud services, hybrid, the role of like machine learning to automate the boring stuff, and to create an adaptive workspace on different levels. The role of security and the role of like identity theft and all these items, that's humongous. Tough to predict how that will look like in 10 years from now, but it's super important. And it's not something we can control, like not something I can control. The only thing I can do is be close to sort of the business consumers and understand what they need, what they want, and also like build a product which I would use myself. Sometimes you might say, hey, listen to others and see what they want. But it starts also, if you build a product yourself, okay, what does the product look like? Do you want to use it yourself? And if the answer is no, then something is wrong from a product design perspective. So build something you want to use yourself. And that could apply to Frame and many other like solutions. And that's, I would say, the sort of ingredient, that's the sort of the secret key to make sure that you never sort of out of sync. Stay close to the consumers. If you're building a product, build a product you want to use yourself, which is meaningful for yourself, and listen to sort of the community, vendors, partners, experts, friends, and just like open minds, see what's happening here. And then I would say you never can go wrong to answer that question. There's no wrong answer, because if you just use these two elements, customers, consumers, and like vendors and marketplace, and combine these two, and just think out loud, be realistic, be smart about it, then it's an exciting time right now, and also in 10 years from now, it will be exciting and meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult question to answer too.
What's your answer, Samit? Where do you see it going?
I like the collaboration answer, by the way. That's a really interesting one, because collaboration thus far has been video calls and then potentially sharing your screen. Fine, you might have great technology like Miro, where people are in there changing cells at the same time or updating workflows, but there's no humanness to that collaboration. So I'm very interested to Ruben's
look at like the new devices or new world devices in 5 years from now. Right now it's clunky.
Immersion, right?
It's clunky. It's like a 2-hour battery life. But imagine like in 5 years, 10 years from now, the exponential growth also applies to that type of development. And then if you look at like platforms on the Microsoft side, on the Meta side, or a combination of both. And then the ability to run all kinds of apps inside the environment, modern apps, classic apps, also is a huge opportunity for our.
You look at that specifically, Ruben, like that's where I was going to go. I was going to say, ultimately, I don't believe that there's going to be a need for application management in its traditional sense, and hopefully the next 10 years, because I think the legacy debt of Windows applications isn't going away, but I think the proliferation of new technology and new apps being built from the ground up with tooling like low code, no code, enterprise grade stuff that people can actually build and share and deploy into production environments. And then potentially, to Ruben's point, if you have adaptive machine learning based security, where now all of a sudden you don't have the security threats of malware infecting these things that Ruben has built because he wants to use it. Someone else out there might want to use it. I do believe that this enterprise low code, no code, citizen developer world is going to give us access to a couple of things. Number one, massive innovation, right? Where people can
Mhm.
share these ideas and start driving a lot of the innovation that we've just kind of slowed down because we have legacy debt. And the second thing it's going to do is it's going to help you reduce that legacy debt. If you have a back-end claims processing for an insurance company that's held together on Server 2000 with bubblegum, Band-Aids, and duct tape
If you keep kicking
versus,
it, it'll still work.
yeah, just, or you develop it with 5 developers that know what they're doing from the ground up because they're the ones processing the claims on a regular basis, you've erased that debt, right? Like, and again, this is all conjecture, hyperbole, to be said. This is not a soothsaying session, but for me, I think that the application landscape is going to move towards that citizen developer, enterprise low code, no code, but that's only going to happen if there's machine learning based network and security settings in place to ensure that everything is being done in a kosher and protected manner that's not going to necessarily introduce risk, because you can't have innovation at the cost of risk. It has to be a good balance.
Yep, balance. Exciting, huh? Good stuff happening on that side.
I might still be around in EUC when that happens. Who knows, Ruben?
Of course, because
got really excited.
because it's all about end users. So
Yeah.
if you're targeted to end users, you focus on that.
Yeah.
Will be around for many years. If it's DAS or VDI or something complete new, for sure, all of the above.
Tying this off, the most important question: which Avenger would you be?
Iron Man.
I thought so. I thought
Yeah.
so.
I'm sure that's on it. I'm sure that's on his Twitter. He's got Tony Stark somewhere in there.
Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. This was a very exciting and fun conversation to sit in and listen to, and definitely exciting to see where things will be going into the future.
Thanks for having me. It was exciting and awesome. And thanks for your time as well. And thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah. And Ruben, thank you for taking your Friday night and talking nerdy with us.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. EUC is fun, so all good. We can talk whole weekend, all good.
Rimo3 offers automated pre-deployment testing of Windows applications, OS updates, and security patches. Use unattended automation to test and assess application readiness for Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, as well as identifying MSIX and multi-session suitability. Your apps, your workspace, our priority.